Chapter 6, Part 3. New Testament Angelology, Service in Heaven and on Earth. As noted earlier, the term angel, angelos, messenger, is nearly always reserved for God's loyal emissaries in the New Testament. The objects of their service are both God and human believers. Angels serve God in heaven in roles of praise, counsel judgment, and enacting God's decrees. On earth, they assist believers, and perhaps less obviously Jesus, a role that takes various forms, and are God's agents of judgment upon unbelievers. Scenes of angelic interaction with people are likely more familiar to us. Consequently, we'll begin with a human focus for angelic service. 1. Ministry on behalf of believers. Descriptions of angelic activity on earth are more numerous in the New Testament than scenes of heavenly service. An earthly focus occupies roughly 3/4 of the approximately 180 references to angels in the New Testament. This frequency should not be surprising, as it is God's will that his heavenly agents serve his human family. Instead of being objects of worship or adoration, angels are cast in the New Testament as ministering spirits sent out to serve for the sake of those who are to inherit salvation. Angels are portrayed rendering their service in a variety of ways. They delivered apostles from prison. One comforted Paul when his life was threatened. Angels brought messages to people in dreams and visions. Angels appeared in the heavens to the shepherds to announce the birth of Jesus. Angels could also encounter humans physically. An angel struck Peter on the side to awaken him in prison and supernaturally freed him from his shackles. The apostle nevertheless presumed he was experiencing a vision until he found himself outside the jail alone on the street. The circumstance of an angel of the Lord appearing to Philip is not qualified as a vision, and so a physical appearance is a possible reading of that encounter. Angels ministered to Jesus after he resisted the devil in the wilderness. An angel rolled back the stone covering the tomb of Jesus and subsequently used it for a seat. These instances are all consistent with portrayals of angels in the Old Testament. It is not surprising, in view of this earlier revelation, that the New Testament has Jewish characters expressing the belief that angels could appear and speak to people. As the writer of Hebrews notes, an angel's true identity in such an encounter could be completely imperceptible. Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unawares. The implication is that angels could not be distinguished from ordinary men. The writer is apparently thinking of Old Testament episodes such as Genesis 18-19. Note, there is no indication that Lot knew the men he saw in Sodom were more than ordinary men, though the reader knows they are angels. Only when the two visitors blinded the threatening mob did it become apparent that the two were more than men. End note. However, explicit references to angels as men are rare in the New Testament, and when they do occur, the men wear dazzling, luminous robes, suggesting they were extraordinary. Note, Luke 2:9 and 13 deserve mention here. Even though the angel, and later a host of angels, who appeared to the shepherds at the birth of Jesus are not referred to as men, the luminous appearance is present in Luke 2:9 and presumably verse 13, alerting the shepherds to a divine presence. The dazzling white robe description is also applied to Jesus at the Transfiguration. When accompanied with luminosity, the white robes apparently signify divine presence. On its own, white robes could conceivably be a striking enough contrast with the earthy, invariably soiled attire of humans to telegraph divinity, or perhaps it denotes purity. End note. One of the more pronounced ministries to people in which angels engage is that of interpreting visions or divine decrees. We saw earlier that this thematic portrayal, the interpreting angel motif, occurred in Old Testament apocalyptic literature. Note, see Chapter 2. Other than explicit conversations where angels interpret divine messaging or visions, recall that the New Testament associates angels with the dispensing of the law at Sinai, which certainly qualifies as a revelation from God. End note. The same is true of apocalyptic literature in the New Testament, particularly the book of Revelation, where angels regularly interpret the visions seen by John. As one specialist of this motif notes, the book of Revelation is the archetype of the apocalyptic genre, and as such it largely conforms to the norms of the type. It presents itself as a revelation, apocalypse, given through the mediation of heavenly beings. Angels are also described in an advocacy role, popularly referred to as guardian angels. Note, this role may be the point of Revelation 1-3, where angels are seemingly assigned to the churches. See chapter 7. End note. Earlier we saw that the Old Testament referred to holy ones as mediators, a role that involved explaining divine decisions and functioning as witness on behalf of the innocent in their suffering. The New Testament contains hints of this same idea, though it is clear that believers no longer need an advocate mediator, because Jesus himself now intercedes for us before God. Matthew 18:10 reads, "See that you do not despise one of these little ones, for I tell you that in heaven their angels always see the face of my Father who is in heaven." This statement, of course, precedes the high priestly work of Christ and draws on Old Testament concepts of angelic mediation. Barrett notes, Judaism believed in protecting and guiding angels. Note, Barrett also suggests that Jews also believed these guardian angels were sometimes thought to resemble the human beings they protected. He cites Genesis 48:16, Tobit 5:4-6 and 21, Matthew 18:10, and Hermas, Vision 5:7 as examples, along with Herman L. Strack and Paul Billerbeck's work. None of these passages say anything about the angel looking like the person being guarded. Tobit 5:4-6 and 20-21 and Hermas 5:1-2 certainly do affirm the notion of guardian angels, but Hermas postdates the New Testament. Strack and Paul Billerbeck also note the later rabbinic example, Genesis Rabbah 78 on Genesis 33:10, where the personal angel looks like the person he protects. This is actually a more relevant example, but also postdates the biblical material. The notion that one's guardian angel looked like the person with whom they are charged by God might derive from Acts 12:12-16, though that passage doesn't actually affirm it. A careful reading of that passage reveals that Rhoda didn't actually see Peter before she rushed to tell the others that he was at the door. She bases her identification solely on the familiarity of his voice. Readers would have to presume that others gathered assumed that the girl had seen a face before proclaiming, "It is his angel," but that reads details into the passage. End note. Pseudo-Philo and the Testament of Jacob draw on Psalm 91:11-12 to express the guardianship of angels. In the book of Tobit, when Tobit and his wife send their son on a journey, he tells her, "Do not worry. Our child will leave in good health and return to us in good health. Your eyes will see him on the day when he returns to you in good health. Say no more. Do not fear for them, my sister, for a good angel will accompany him. His journey will be successful, and he will come back in good health." Tobit 5:21-22. Acts 12 apparently has some aspect of angelic oversight in view. After an angel freed Peter from prison, Peter went to the house of Mary, the mother of John, whose other name was Mark, where many were gathered together and were praying. A servant girl named Rhoda responded to his knock, recognized his voice, but in her excitement at hearing Peter, ran to tell those gathered instead of letting him inside. Despite their prayers, they didn't believe her report, replying, "It is his angel." Peter kept knocking and was finally welcome. The believers gathered that night believed that Peter had a personal angel. The idea of guardian angels apparently includes protection, as angels did rescue people, but angelic oversight in the human sphere also includes keeping track of evil perpetrated on the innocent for later judgment, or a record of those who will inherit eternal life. Recall that the books in heaven concept was associated with the divine council in the ancient Near East. Jesus says specifically of believers in Revelation 3:5 that, "I will confess his name before my Father and before his angels." The reference to angels speaks of both council validation of those who belong to Christ, see below, but also of angelic witness to such a verdict. Elsewhere in the book of Revelation, this confession, or rejection, has to do with the book of life. In Luke 10:20, Jesus told the 70 disciples, "Do not rejoice in this, that the spirits are subject to you, but rejoice that your names are written in heaven." Other believers are recorded in the book of life. This may be the context for a verse like Luke 16:22, where, upon death, the poor man was carried by angels to the afterlife comfort of Abraham's side. Given that some of these passages in Revelation are naturally associated with the apocalyptic eschaton, it is relevant to note that angels are also tasked with gathering the elect, those found in the book of life, at such time. 2. Judgment of unbelievers. That the New Testament portrays angels as agents of divine judgment should be no surprise. As we have seen, both the Old Testament and Second Temple Judaism describe God as having angel armies to punish the wicked. We saw that most of these portrayals were eschatological, but not all. This is true of the New Testament as well. The only exception is the judgment of Herod, whose ignominious end is described in Acts 12:21-23. On an appointed day, Herod put on his royal robes, took his seat upon the throne, and delivered an oration to them. And the people were shouting, "The voice of a god and not of a man." Immediately an angel of the Lord struck him down, because he did not give God the glory. And he was eaten by worms, and breathed his last. As implied above, the New Testament motif of angelic judgment is nearly always apocalyptic, situated at the time of the end of days, in concert with the day of the Lord, or day of Christ, at his second coming. For example, Jesus told the assembled crowd a parable about weeds in a wheat field, and then explained its meaning. Then he left the crowds and went into the house, and his disciples came to him, saying, "Explain to us the parable of the weeds of the field." He answered, "The one who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world, and the good seed is the sons of the kingdom. The weeds are the sons of the evil one, and the enemy who sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the reapers are the angels. Just as the weeds are gathered and burned with fire, so will it be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send his angels, and they will gather out of his kingdom all causes of sin and all lawbreakers, and throw them into the fiery furnace. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. He who has ears, let him hear." The parable of the net set forth the same point. Part of Jesus' explanation was, "The angels will come out and separate the evil from the righteous and throw them into the fiery furnace." Angels function in the role of destroyers as part of this frightful apocalyptic vision, assaulting the earth and the wicked with plagues, war, famine, disease, and cosmic upheaval at the time of the end. Amid the judgment, angels at times warn the inhabitants of earth and encourage the righteous to endure. The reverse situation, gathering the elect, is described in Matthew 13:27. Jesus taught that, at the time of the end, God will send out the angels and gather his elect from the four winds, from the ends of the earth to the ends of heaven. The synoptic parallel to this passage in Matthew 24:31 adds an element, "And he will send out his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other." Here the angels gather the elect in conjunction with a loud trumpet call. This description links the motif of angels gathering the elect with other passages dealing with the return of the Lord. Casting a wider net beyond the angelic role of gathering the elect reveals that angels are more generally described as accompanying the Lord at his return. For the Son of Man is going to come with his angels in the glory of his Father. In certain instances, the entourage is overtly militaristic. Jesus returns with an angelic army. The portrayal by design draws the attention of the reader to Yahweh's angelic host accompanying him at the day of the Lord. 3. Service in heaven. Though it seems obvious that angels would be engaged in praising God, specific references to that effect are not common in the New Testament. Earlier we noted the instance in Luke 2:13, where a multitude of the heavenly host praised God at the announcement of the birth of Messianic child. Angelic worship is noted in passing in Revelation 4-5, a scene which many readers presume is focused on angelic worship of the Lamb. In reality, it is the 24 elders, the 4 living creatures, and glorified human worshippers who fall down before the Lamb. Note, these elements are important given the Second Temple Jewish notion of believing communities, imagining their worship being synchronized with the activities in heaven. Scholars refer to this practice and its associated belief as Merkabah mysticism. The term Merkabah means throne chariot, and is drawn from visions of God on his throne, like Ezekiel 1. The sect at Qumran, for example, separated from the Jerusalem temple over the matter of celestial worship and its associated solar calendar. Since Revelation 4-5 draws elements from Ezekiel 1, scholars consider Revelation 4-5 an instance of Merkabah mysticism. End note. Only in Revelation 5:11-12 do angels enter the picture, and then in a great multitude. Then I looked, and I heard around the throne and the living creatures and the elders the voice of many angels, numbering myriads of myriads and thousands of thousands, saying with a loud voice, "Worthy is the Lamb who was slain, to receive power and wealth, and wisdom and might, and honor and glory and blessing." Angels have other responsibilities in heaven besides praising God. The term archangel suggests hierarchical rule, that is, certain angels have oversight over other angels. But the 2 references to archangels we noted earlier do not reveal much about that oversight. More interesting are those passages that cast angels as approving divine decisions, a role akin to the divine council scenes of the Old Testament. Revelation 4-5 is commonly accepted by scholars as a divine council scene. As Owen notes, the focus on the throne vision is God enthroned in his heavenly court, surrounded by a variety of angelic beings or lesser deities, angels, archangels, seraphim, cherubim, who function as courtiers. All such descriptions of God enthroned in the midst of his heavenly court are based on the ancient conception of the divine council or assembly found in Mesopotamia, Ugarit, and Phoenicia, as well as in Israel. While we clearly have a meeting in heaven involving God and his host, the role of angels operates on the periphery. One angel asks loudly, "Who is worthy to open the scroll and break its seals?" And then the multitude joins in the praise. Other passages reveal more of what we've come to expect as council input. Several stand out. "The one who conquers will be clothed thus in white garments, and I will never blot his name out of the book of life. I will confess his name before my Father and before his angels." Revelation 3:5. "And I tell you, everyone who acknowledges me before men, the Son of Man also will acknowledge before the angels of God. But the one who denies me before men will be denied before the angels of God." Revelation 12:8-9. In both passages, Jesus presents believers destined for heaven not only to God, but also to the heavenly host. It is not that Jesus or the believer whose name is in the book of life need an administrative stamp of approval from the divine assembly. Rather, the scene is one of introducing a new family member into their heavenly home. The council validates or enthusiastically endorses those who are in Christ, who have endured in faith to the end. The most dramatic passage in this regard is Hebrews 2:10-15. "For it was fitting for him for whom are all things, and through whom are all things, in bringing many sons to glory, to perfect the originator of their salvation through sufferings. For both the one who sanctifies and the ones who are sanctified are all from one. For which reason he, Jesus, is not ashamed to call them brothers, saying, I will proclaim your name to my brothers. In the midst of the assembly I will sing in praise of you. And again, I will trust in him. And again, behold, I and the children God has given me. Therefore, since the children share in blood and flesh, he also in like manner shared in these same things, in order that, through death, He could destroy the one who has the power of death, that is, the devil, and could set free these who, through fear of death, were subject to slavery throughout all their lives. Note that Jesus calls believers his siblings in the midst of the assembly. Because of his incarnation, work on the cross, resurrection, and ascension, Jesus brings human believers into the divine family, and the supernatural sons of God of the heavenly host rejoice.